You've picked up GLOOMHAVEN Digital, and it's time to level up your strategy. These 10 tips will help you improve your game right away. I'm Flash, and this is Legendary Tactics. These 10 ideas will cover placement tactics, card management, situation-specific hints, the math behind the game, and the overall strategic principles of GLOOMHAVEN Digital. Number 10. There's no time to waste in this game. The minute you enter the dungeon, the clock is ticking. You can't hear it or see it, but every card in your hand is like a grain of sand in a timer. Once your cards are spent, your crawl is over. This means you don't have time to waste. If you hold your position too frequently, you just won't have the movement cards you need to get through all the rooms. So dive in, be aggressive, and start bashing some skulls, and don't be afraid to leap right into battle. On to number 9. One important decision for a player is how to use initiative. This choice controls much of the flow of the game, including A. Whether you or the monsters move first. B. Which abilities trigger first. C. Where characters will be when attacks are activated. D. Who will absorb the damage. And E. What future initiative will remain. Perhaps you need to save high initiative for when you're in close proximity. Remember that going first is not always advisable. Early initiative is great for activating powers such as invisibility, but in a subsequent turn, you want to go late so that your invisibility remains active across 2 turns. After all, conditions like this wear off at the end of your next turn. So in essence, you get a 2-for-1 deal. Using an early, then late rhythm will win you all kinds of advantages. Conversely, summoners want to actually summon late since they don't actually appear immediately, and then they want to act early in the next turn so that your apparition gets to attack first. So find a tempo that maximizes the effects of your particular cards. Number 8. There will be plenty of time for you to rest when you beat the level. No matter how tempting it is to cycle your best cards back into your hand, it's best to play through all of your cards before you reset, no matter how terrible they are. Don't forget, you can always default to the basic abilities on each card: 2 attack or 2 movement. If you like GLOOMHAVEN content and want to see more, stab the like button. It really helps our channel out a lot. Number 7. Each mission is unique and it requires the right tool set. If you aren't having luck with a particular scenario, be sure to identify your objective and choose the right cards for the job. Just because you've leveled up your cards doesn't necessarily mean they're the right ones for each mission. You can always go back to previous cards. This is an especially important consideration when you have a new character join the fray. They bring a new set of abilities. So think about what your party's lost when a character retires and fill the gaps. Rebalance, because balance is absolutely crucial. Heavy attacking tanks aren't as powerful if they aren't supported by healers. Number 6. Remember, this is a cooperative game. It sounds obvious, right? But often players prioritize the needs and desires of the character they control, and they forget to benefit the greater good. If you're playing with friends, remember that choices should be made to help the team rather than the individual. While it might be tempting to take an extra turn to get a pile of gold, ultimately, that greediness might endanger a vulnerable ally. To maximize the greater good, talk to the other players after your initiative is revealed. You're free to chat as much as you need to then. Before anyone rushes to act, see how your abilities will match up and be flexible with how you execute. Number 5. It's not a great idea to open yourself to attack prematurely. If you open too many doors too quickly, you'll die. But when you do need to open a door, be sure to do so with a tank who can absorb the damage that you'll inevitably suffer from the hidden ranged creatures. If your tank is too low, use invisibility. You should also be sure to have a room well in hand before you unleash a new horde of enemies to deal with. Just don't stall too long or you'll run out of turns before you can get through the scenario. While timing doors can be tricky, just focus on moving quickly without overcommitting. Number 4. In GLOOMHAVEN, one of the most important decisions you have to make is where to place your hero. Always know how far your foes can travel and who they'll be targeting. Studying the enemy abilities may feel a little bit like metagaming, but this information is public and you should make use of it. In order, these are the considerations that you need to make. A. Can you lure a foe into a trap or funnel enemies into a kill zone? B. Can you set up a crushing multi-hex attack? C. Can you get an enemy to come to you so you don't waste movement going to them? D. Which character will have initiative and consequently soak damage? It's often wise to spread the damage across multiple characters by separating the creatures. E. Can you use ranged characters to your advantage and to your foe's disadvantage? And F, can you block a summon by occupying adjacent spaces? Pay really close attention to your tactics, they really matter. If you've gotten value from this video, please take a moment to subscribe. Our number 3 tip is based on the statistics. Gloomhaven isn't a dice fest, but it does use a system that you can take advantage of. Early in the game, you'll only have a general sense of what attack modifiers are likely to be drawn from your deck. But as you burn through the deck, be sure to count your cards and keep track of which ones have been used. Having awareness of your odds of success when you really need to have that success can be a real benefit. If you burn through a dozen of your modifier cards and still haven't pulled a 2x modifier, you know that statistically your chances are much higher of achieving that. If the null card hasn't been drawn, consider strengthening so that you'll bypass the null attack. If you're smart when you upgrade your modifier deck, you should focus on removing as many negative card effects as possible. The more streamlined your deck is, the more predictable it becomes. Number 2. Next, we'll discuss hand management. It's imperative that you don't exhaust your characters before the end of the scenario. To avoid this, don't play your burn cards too early in the scenario, or you place a limit on the maximum number of turns at your disposal. The temptation will be strong to do some huge damage early on, but this is a game of slow attrition, and you can't afford to lose your abilities too quickly. Remember that cards are your stamina. If we math this out, when your brute permanently burns a card before their first rest, you'll decrease your maximum turns by 4. The earlier you burn them, the more turns you lose. This is especially true for a character like the Tinkerer, who has 36 maximum turns, but also a high number of burn cards. Don't be tempted to burn a card in order to negate non-fatal damage. The card is almost always more valuable than a temporary shield. When it comes to short and long rests, rests will vary depending on what class and scenario you're playing. The Brute or item-heavy classes, for example, might benefit from a long rest so you can refresh those items, whereas the Cragheart and the Spellweaver should primarily use short rests. The downside to a long rest is that you aren't contributing for a turn. This isn't too serious though if you stagger long rests across your characters at different times. The cost to a short rest is that you don't get to choose which card you lose, and this becomes very important as you get better cards in your hand, and you don't want to lose those killer cards and killer combos. For characters with fewer cards, long rests are preferable because you don't play a card, which lengthens your turns and gives you more longevity in the scenario. If you're right in the middle of a big fight though, you really don't have the option to long rest, so short rest it is. Number 1. The most important piece of advice that I can offer is to be adaptable. You'll often go into a round with a plan in mind, based on where your initiative lands, what cards the other players choose, and what the outcomes are before your turn. You may need to adapt your plan on the fly. It's this part of the game that makes it so interesting to play. You're not locked into your original plan. A strong Gloomhaven player will adapt on the fly, pivot to what benefits the whole team, and take advantage of unforeseen opportunities. You may realize that one enemy is more dangerous than another and needs to be dealt with because your incompetent ally muffed an attack. Stay on your toes and play in the moment. If there are other valuable strategies we should have included, please add a comment. We appreciate when viewers add to the conversation. Thanks for your time, and good luck with your crawl.